My parents did not come to my wedding. Not because of a family feud. Not because they were sick or out of the country or unable to travel. They stayed home, 40 minutes away, on purpose. Because the man I was marrying wore a security guard's uniform to work every day. And in my mother's words, "We didn't raise you to settle." I walked down the aisle with 2 empty chairs in the front row. But here's what my parents didn't know when they made that choice. My husband's coworker filmed 10 seconds of him doing his job 3 weeks earlier. 10 seconds, uploaded almost as a joke, that would end up in front of 11 million people before the month was over. And when my mother finally saw it, she called me sobbing, asking why I never told her who he really was. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened, because by the end of this, I think you'll understand why I never answered that phone call the way she wanted me to. Before I go on, I want to ask you something. If someone you loved judged the person you chose to marry, not for their character, but for their job title, or their paycheck, or how it looked on paper to everyone else, would you have stood your ground the way I did? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're new here, hit subscribe before we go any further. This channel grows one person at a time, one subscribe at a time, far more than it ever grows from people just watching and scrolling past. It genuinely helps more than you'd think. Okay, here's what happened. My name is Megan. I'm 31. I work in medical billing outside Sacramento. And 3 years ago, I met a man named Danny at, of all places, a laundromat, because my dryer broke and his apartment building didn't have one. Danny worked nights as a security guard at a mid-sized shopping plaza. Steady job, decent pay, absolutely nothing glamorous about it. He wore a navy uniform with his name stitched on the chest, carried a flashlight and a radio, and spent 8 hours a night walking the same parking lot, checking the same locked doors. My parents are not cruel people, not in the way you'd picture cruelty. My father is a retired orthodontist. My mother ran a boutique interior design firm for 22 years. They live in a house with a wine cellar and a housekeeper who comes twice a week. And somewhere along the way, without ever saying it directly, they built an entire identity around the idea that the people in our family marry up, not sideways, and certainly not down. The first time I brought Danny to Sunday dinner, my mother was polite in the specific, brittle way she gets when she's deciding how to feel about someone. She asked him what he did. He told her, plainly, no embarrassment in his voice at all. Security guard, over at Fairview Plaza. She smiled and changed the subject to the wine. Later that night, she called me. He seems sweet, Megan, very sweet. But security work isn't exactly a career, is it? What's the plan? Is he going to school for something? I told her Danny had a plan. He was saving to become a licensed private investigator, something he'd wanted since he was a teenager, and the guard job was how he was funding the training. She made a small, doubtful sound, the kind you make when you've already decided something isn't going to happen and you're too polite to say it outright. That doubtful sound became the soundtrack of the next 2 years. Danny proposed on a Tuesday. Nothing fancy, just the 2 of us on my apartment balcony, with cheap wine and a ring he'd been paying off for 4 months. I said yes before he even finished the sentence. I called my mother that same night, still glowing, still shaking a little from happiness. There was a long pause on the line. Then she said, "Megan, honey, are you sure? You have a college degree. You have options. I just worry you're settling because you're comfortable, not because this is actually what's best for you." Settling. That word sat in my chest like a stone for days. My father was quieter about it, but no less clear. At a dinner a few weeks later, he pulled me aside and said, "I just want you to think long-term, sweetheart. Security guards don't exactly have upward mobility. What happens in 10 years, when your friends are living in houses like ours and you're still counting pennies?" I told him Danny wasn't just anything, that he was steady and kind, and had never once made me feel small, which was more than I could say for some of the men my parents had approved of over the years. He didn't argue. He just gave me the look he used to give me as a teenager when he thought I was making a mistake he couldn't stop. Planning the wedding, my mother's objections got quieter, but never disappeared. She'd mention, almost casually, the son of a family friend who'd just made partner at a law firm. She'd ask, more than once, if I was absolutely certain, in a tone that made it clear she already knew my answer disappointed her. 6 weeks before the wedding, she called with an ultimatum dressed up as concern. "Your father and I have talked about it," she said. "We don't think we can in good conscience stand up in front of everyone and celebrate this. It's not that we don't love you, we just can't pretend we're happy about the direction your life is going." I asked her, flatly, if that meant they weren't coming. "I think it's better for everyone," she said, "if we sit this one out." They sat it out. 3 weeks before the wedding, while my parents were quietly deciding my life wasn't worth showing up for, something happened at Danny's job that none of us saw coming. Something that had nothing to do with our wedding at all, and everything to do with who Danny actually was. Underneath that uniform, my mother couldn't look past. It started as an ordinary Thursday night shift. It ended with Danny running directly into a burning maintenance room to pull an unconscious coworker out by himself, 30 seconds before the fire suppression system failed completely. And somebody's phone camera caught the last 10 seconds of it. Danny never told me the full story that night. He came home smelling like smoke, said there'd been an incident at the plaza, that everyone was okay, and went straight to the shower without another word. That's who he is. The kind of man who runs toward danger and then comes home and doesn't mention it because he doesn't think it's a big deal. A coworker of Danny's, a 19-year-old named Josh, who'd been filming a slow night for a social media joke, had caught the moment on his phone almost by accident. 10 seconds. Danny sprinting into thick gray smoke pouring out of a maintenance door, disappearing completely for 6 seconds that felt like an hour, then reappearing dragging a full-grown man over his shoulder, collapsing onto the pavement seconds before the door behind them buckled inward. Josh posted it with the caption, "My coworker's a real-life action movie and doesn't even care. Lol." It had 400 views by that afternoon. By the next morning, it had 400,000. By the end of the week, local news picked it up. Then a national morning show. Then it crossed 11 million views, with headlines calling Danny the security guard who ran into the fire, and comment sections filled with strangers calling him a hero, asking his name, asking if he was single, completely unaware that in 9 days, this quiet man everyone was suddenly obsessed with was going to be my husband. Danny hated the attention. He gave one short interview only because his manager asked him to, and in it he said the sentence that ended up under nearly every clip of the footage. "I didn't think about it, I just did my job." My mother saw the clip on the morning show 3 days before the wedding, with absolutely no idea the man in the video was the one she'd refused to celebrate. She called me that same afternoon, and her voice sounded different than I'd heard it in months. "Megan," she said, Is that Danny? On the news?" I let the silence sit for a moment before I answered her. She started crying almost immediately, the kind of crying that comes from shame more than sadness. "Megan, I had no idea. I didn't know he was, running into a fire, saving someone's life. That's incredible. Why didn't you tell us?" "Because it shouldn't have mattered," I said. "That's the whole point, Mom. He was already the man I'm marrying before that video existed. He was already brave, and steady, and good to me, every single day, long before 11 million strangers decided that made him worth respecting. You didn't refuse to come to my wedding because you didn't know he was capable of something heroic. You refused because of a job title. The video didn't change who he is. It just finally showed you something you'd already decided you didn't want to see." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, in a small voice I barely recognized, "Is there still time? Can we still come?" I thought about the 2 empty chairs I'd already made peace with. I thought about every dismissive comment over the last 2 years. Every, "Are you sure?" every conversation where my happiness got weighed against a job title like it was a liability on a spreadsheet. "You can come," I told her, "but I need you to understand something first. You're not coming because a stranger's phone video convinced you Danny is worth something. You're coming because you're my mother, and I'm choosing to give you another chance, even though you didn't give him one when it actually counted. Before anyone was watching, before there was anything to be proud of on camera." My parents came. They sat in the front row this time, in the seats that had been empty in every version of this day I'd imagined for weeks. My mother cried through most of the ceremony. Real tears, not performance, though I noticed she still couldn't quite meet Danny's eyes until the reception, when he hugged her without hesitation and told her simply, "I'm glad you're here." That's Danny. No grudge, no speech about what she'd put us through, just quiet grace. The same quiet grace that made him run into smoke for a stranger, without stopping to think about it. It's been 8 months since the wedding. My parents have made real effort since then. Dinners at our apartment. My father asking Danny genuine questions about his private investigator training, instead of doubtful ones about his upward mobility. I believe the effort is real. I also haven't forgotten how close it came to not happening at all, and how little it had to do with who Danny actually was, and how much it had to do with what he wore to work. Here's what I keep coming back to, months later. The man my parents refused to celebrate on my wedding day was the exact same man who ran into a burning room for a stranger 3 weeks earlier. Nothing about his character changed. Only their willingness to see it did, and only after 11 million people saw it first. If someone in your life has ever been dismissed for what they do instead of who they are, I hope this reminds you that the people worth building a life with rarely announce their worth loudly. Sometimes it takes a 10-second clip for the world to notice what you knew all along. If this story moved you, hit subscribe before you go. It genuinely helps this channel grow, one person at a time. New story every week, and every single one earns its ending. I'll see you in the next one.